Okay, great. So, you got the recorder going?
Yeah.
Okay, great. So the Mishnah says, Megillah Nikreis B'Yid Aleph B'Yid Beis Gimel Yudal Tesvav Lo Pachos V'Lo Yoser Krachan HaMukafin Chomi Mos Yoshua B'Nun Korin B'Tesvav. Okay, they read on the 15th of Adar. Kvarim V'Ayaros Gedolos Korin B'Yud Daled Ela Shekvarim Makdim in the Yom HaKnisa. The Kvarim villages can read on Monday and Thursday. Keitzad Chalios Yudaled. So the 14th, which is the main day of Purim, except for Krachan HaMukafin Chama Mos Yoshua B'Nun, as we'll discuss. So if the 14th day of Adar is on Monday, Kfarim V'Ayaros Gedolos Korin Bo Bayom. The Kfarim, right, it's Monday and Thursday for them, so here it works out. They could read Bo Bayom. Umukafas Choma Lamachar, so they would read on the 15th, which is Tuesday. Chalios B'Shlishi, Tuesday Abervi, Kfarim Magdim in the Yom HaKnisa. So they would go back to Monday. In that case, Monday would either be the 13th or the 12th. V'Ayaros Gedolos Korin Bo Bayom, Umukafas Choma Lamachar, and they would read on the 15th. Chalios B'Chamishi, Kfarim V'Ayaros Gedolos Korin Bo Bayom, Umukafas Choma Lamachar. You're allowed to read the Megillah on Erev Shabbos. As we'll see, Shabbos presents some other challenges. Chalios Erev Shabbos Kvarim Magdim Liyom HaKnisa, so they'll read on the 13th. V'Ayaros Gedolos Umukafos Choma Korin Bo Bayom, they'll read on the 14th. In other words, instead of the Mukavos Choma reading on the 15th is normally what's appropriate for them because of the extra day of fighting that took place in Shushan. We'll discuss all of these things in detail, so they'll read on Erev Shabbos. Sometimes they can read on the 14th. Chalios B'Shabbos, if the 14th falls out on Shabbos, you're not going to read the Megillah on Shabbos. Two reasons for that. First of all, we're concerned people are going to carry the Megillah, Gzera D'Rabba. The second reason is the Shita of Rav Yosef, that Aniyim expect tzedakah when they hear the Megillah being read. We'll discuss all of these things, very beautiful ideas. So you can't read the Megillah on Shabbos. Kfarim V'Ayaros Gedolos Makdimin V'Korin L'Yom HaKnisa. So the Kfarim and the Ayaros would actually, in that case, not read on Erev Shabbos, but they would actually read on Yom HaKnisa. That's a little bit surprising. You would think the Kfarim would go back 2 days, which will be to the 12th, and the Ayaros Gedolos would go back to Erev Shabbos, but no, we say Kfarim V'Ayaros Gedolos Makdimin V'Korin L'Yom HaKnisa. Mukafos Choma L'Machar. They'll read on the 15th. Chalios Achar Shabbos Kvarim Makdim L'Yom HaKnisa. So it's if the Yudalit is Sunday, so then the Kvarim go back to Thursday, which is the 11th. Ayaros Gedolos Korin Bo Bayom Mukafos Choma L'Machar. So in terms of the Kvarim, the question is, what is the nature of this? Why do we allow the Bnei HaKvarim to read on Monday and Thursday? So Rashi says, this is the Rashi of Kvarim Makdim L'Yom HaKnisa. A few lines down into that Rashi. Rashi says, "Shakavarim miskansan yaros lemishpat lefi Shabbat edin and Yoshin bayaros b'sheni v'chamishi kitakanas Ezra." The Gemara Bava Kama daf Pei Beis Amud Aleph. Ezra set up a takana that courts would be held on Monday and Thursday. V'akvarim einan beki and likros utzrichan sheikra ena lahem echad b'bnei ha'ir v'lo hitzrichum chachamim lehis acher. So the rabbis had a little bit of rachmanis. They came into the big cities on Monday and Thursday. They couldn't have a minyan in the village on Yudalid because they didn't have anybody who knew how to read the Megillah properly. So instead of making them come back 3 times during the week, they said, okay, so you could read in a big city on Monday. Somebody's going to read the Megillah for you. What's really interesting is we're going to find another rationale which is discussed, which is not so much as a favor to the Kfarim, but as a favor to the people in the large cities, the Ayaros Gedolos, that the Bnei Kfarim, they were the ones who sold the food that would be needed for the Seudah. So the question is the takana of the Kfarim, Magdim and the Yom HaKnisa, is that qua the Kfarim? Is that to their advantage, or is it out of actual concern for the Ayaros Gedolos? Rabbeinu Chananel on the side here is a little bit of a different version. He says it's not so much about the Batei Din, which would gather on Monday and Thursday, but he puts it in terms of they would come into the cities to hear the Torah read and to daven b'tzibur. They would daven b'yechidas. Basically, they didn't have minyanim. So they're looking for a minyan, so they would come into the big city for a minyan Mondays and Thursdays and to have kriyas HaTorah. It's a very fascinating thing that they would have tefillah b'tzibur on days when there was kriyas HaTorah. They wouldn't have tefillah b'tzibur the rest of the time. They would daven b'yechidas. So the Gemara says, Megillah Nikreis B'Yid Aleph Minalan. Minalan, K'damein L'Meimer L'Kaman, Chachamim Yikilu L'Akvaram L'Yos Makdim L'Yom HaKnisa. So when we okay, so the way that it sounds here from this language of Chachamim Hekilu al Akfarim. So Jacob, which way does that sound? That it's really a takana that was done for the advantage of the Kfarim. In other words, it's not so much about them supplying the Ayaros Gedolos, It's about them. It's about their own convenience. So the Gemara immediately starts out by saying that it's a kula for them, but then the Gemara turns around and say, well, so certainly there's an economic factor there, but it is very fascinating that the Gemara refers to this as a kula for the kvar. Again, there are two different rationales to explain why they would be able to read on Yud Aleph, Yud Beis, or Yud Gimel. Either it's about them, that they shouldn't have to come into the city multiple times, or it's so that, as the Gemara says, that sounds like it's much more about the Ayarus Gedolos. So it's interesting that here the Gemara says it's a kula for the Kfarim, but really it seems like the beneficiaries are those who reside in the Ayarus Gedolos. So Anan Hachi Karminan Mechti. Kulu Anshe Knesses Gedola Tekninu. This is all takana the Anshe Knesses Gedola. This is an important point. If you say that they're only takana over the 2 days of Yudalad and Tesvav, Asu Rabbanan V'Akri Takanasa the Takina Anshe Knesses Gedola, how could any later rabbis reverse that? V'atznan in Bezdin Yachal Avatul Devi Bezdin Chavero. Nobody could be greater in Chachma and stature than the Anshe Knesses Hagedola. So you have to understand that it was the Anshe Knesses Hagedola themselves who were the ones that established this kula of the Kfarim being able to read on Yud Aleph, Yud Beis, and Yud Gimel. Again, the Kfarim are just the villagers. They don't have a minyan there, so they would need to come into the big cities to read on Monday and Thursday. Okay. So Ella Pshita, Kulu Anshe Knesses Hagedola Takinu, they established everything. Heicha Remiza, but where is it alluded to in the text of the Megillah itself? Amar Rav Shimon bar Abba, Amar Rav Yochanan, Amar Kra, L'kayem es yimei Purim ha'ela bizmanehem, Zmanim harbe teknu lahem, that there are many different times of reading the Megillah, not just Zmanim, which would be Yudalad and Tesvav, but Shlomo Zmanim harbe, which implies more than the minimum of plurality, more than two. Okay, so Haimi Baile the Gufe, but don't you need that to establish that there is a din of Kriyas Megillah? Im Kain Lemakra Zman, My Zmanehem Zmanim Tuba, that there are multiple times. V'akasi Mi Baile Zmano Shel Zeh Lo Kizmano Shel Zeh. But don't we have to establish the principle that Yudalad and Tesvav are separate? That if you live in an Ir HaMukav Choma Mimos Yoshua Benud, Krach Mukav Choma, they're not Yotze on Yudalad and vice versa. So Im Kain Lemakra Zmanam. Zmanam would establish that the times really are not interchangeable. My zmanehem, shmas mina kulu, that you learn zmanim harbe teknu lahem. Se'ema zmanim tuva. So maybe we could say that it's even more. Zmanehem dumya de zmanam, ma zmanam trey. If the Megillah prescribes 2 different days, 14 and 15, af zmanehem trey. So there are 2 days that the Chachamim, the Anshe Knesses Hagedola, are adding. So which ones you have? Yud Aleph, Yud Beis, and Yud Gimel. Which of the 3? So the Gemara is going to go on to explain. So which 2 are the days that the Anshe Knesses Hagedola had to add, and which one is sort of muvan me'elav, is understood in its own right? Ve'ema trei sarutle, so that they added the 12th and the 13th. Kedam Rav Shmuel bar Yitzchak, Yud Gimel zman kihila lakolhi v'lo tzarich l'ribuye. Hachanami Yud Gimel zman kihila lakolhi v'lo tzarich l'ribuye. You don't need any special takana to establish that the 13th is a day that you could read the Megillah, because the 13th is zman kihila lakolhi. So Rashi says, this is the top of the left-hand column in Rashi, Zman Kila Lakoli, Hakol Nikaluli Katninake Me Oivehem, Bain Bishushan, Bain Bishar Mikomo, Shekasuv Bisefer, Hokach Lotzarech Krali Ribuye, Sheyehe Roy Lakriya, the Ikaranez Bohaya. Obviously, you can read the Megillah on the 13th, because the 13th was the day of the primary miracle. Remember, the 13th of this day, Haman was going to destroy the Jewish people. It was that day that the Jewish people fought against their enemies, and in Shushan, they simply requested an extra day. It's very fascinating. So Rashi's Shita is, it's completely and altogether obvious that you should be able to read the Megillah on the 13th. Why? Because it was the day of the Nes, the military victory. Right? Rabbeinu Tam and the Sheiltos, you don't have it right here in front of you, but the Hagos Maimunios quotes it in Hilchos Tanios Perek Hey, when we talk about Tanis Esther, has a totally different perspective of what Yud Gimel Zman Kila Lakoli. I'll just read from the Hagos Maimunios. This is very important. The Rambam says that Tanis Esther is v'nahagu kol Yisrael b'zmanim elu lis'anos b'yud gimel ba'adar zecher l'tanis she'sa'anu b'mei Haman shenemar divrei atzomos v'za'akasam. So the Rambam says that Tanis Esther is really b'toras a minhag, as opposed to the other Tanios, which are divrei Kabbalah and Yom Kippur, which is obviously minat Torah. It's perhaps the lowest level Tanis. So Hagos Maimunios just quotes here in terms of Tanis Esther, b'shiltos parshas vayikra yalaf me'ahachad amar b'shmuel bar Yitzchak Yud Gimel Zman Kila Lakolu. It's not a minhag, it's actually a din of the Gemara. Shabo Nikalu Ayehudim Ba'areim My kihila yom tanish and miskansin bo Yisrael v'yoshvin betanis and mivakshin rachamim. So two very different interpretations of why it's obvious that you could read the Megillah on the 13th. Either it's obvious that you could read the Megillah on the 13th because it was the day of the military victory, or according to the Sheiltos and the Balei Tosos in general, what we mean when we say Yud Gimel Zman Kila Lakoli is that already in the times of the Gemara there was this observance of Tanis Esther on Yud Gimel. So the Rambam obviously doesn't learn that way. He says it's a minhag based on the pasuk of Divrei Atzomos V'Za'ak Asam that we established the minhag to fast. But here you have an important machlokes, the first major issue that we have. Yud Gimel Zman Kila Lakolhi V'Lo Tzarich L'Ribuye. Okay, very good. So Ve'ema Shitzar V'Shivsar, maybe the extra days that Chachamim added are 16 and 17. V'Lo Yavor Ksiv. It can't be after the 15th because the pasuk says Ve'ayimim ha'ela nizkarim v'na'asim b'chol dor v'dor, and the pasuk says V'Lo Yavor. Reb Shmuel bar Nachmani Amar Kra, he learns it differently, not from Bizmanehem. He says Kayamim asher nachu b'hem ha'Yehudim Yamim Kayamim L'Rabos Yud Aleph v'Yud Beis. Okay, that just as the Megillah prescribes 2 days to read the Megillah, the Anshe Knesset Gedolah added another 2, and those were the 11th and 12th of Adar. Ve'ema Treisar Utzleisar. How do you know that it's not the 12th and 13th? As we said before, Mishum Yitzchak Yud Gimel Zman Kila Lakoli V'Lo Tzarech L'Ribuye. Ve'ema Shitzar V'Shivsar. Maybe what was added the days of the 16th and the 17th. V'Lo Ya'avor Ksiv. Rabbi Shimon bar Nachmani my time lo Amar mi Bizmanehem. So why does he opt for this Kayamim? Zmanam, Zmanehem lo mashmalei. He's the Yukim, he didn't buy them so much. Rabbi Shimon bar Abba, why does he say Kayamim asher nachu b'hem ha'Yehudim e'oveim? My time lo Amar mi Kayamim. Amar l'cha ho l'dorus u'dichsiv. That's establishing that it would be a chiyuv in every single generation. So it's very important that the chiyuv of Kriyas HaMegillah is in every generation. So what about this Mishnah in its entirety? Amar Rabba bar Chanan Yochanan Zodivei Rabbi Kiva Stimta'a. These are the words of Rabbi Kiva Stimta'a. Rashi points out that there is a daya out there that all Stam Mishnahs are attributed to the school of Rabbi Kiva. Because normally we say Stam Mishnah, who's the author, Shlomo? Rabbi Meir. He's a Talmud of Rabbi Kiva. You just take a look here in Rashi. It's an important idea for you guys to have. Zodivrei Rabbi Kiva. So Hachi Gam Rabbi Yochanan Rabbi Demasnis and Rabbi Kiva Amra Stimta Harbe Stam Mishnah Sasam Rabbi Shein Divrei Rabbi Kiva. Yesh Meforshim Stimta Kol Astumim Talmidav Hayu Kedavar Sanhedrin Stam Mishnah Rabbi Meir Stam Tosefta Rabbi Nechemiah Stam Sifra Rabbi Huda. All of these are Talmidim of Rabbi Kiva. V'kulu Stimtoi Aliva de Rabbi Kiva. Ach Kasha Be'enai the Farish Kain. Rashi says he doesn't buy it so much. Amatzina B'cham Makomos B'Shem. Rabbi Lazar, Rabbi Yossi Stimtai, Rabbi Nachem, Rabbi Yossi Stimtai, the Kama and Perik Bnei Ha'ir. That there are many other Stimtas, there are many other Stam, whether it's where it's not attributable to the school of Rabbi Akiva. Just important, I wanted you guys to know that there is a day out there that all things that Rabbi Akiva, all things that Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi was so same. When we say Stam Mishnah is like Rabbi Meir, or that Rabbi Chia and Rabbi Yoshaya were so same in the Tosefta, etc., that these are all attributable to the school of Rabbi Akiva. Just in terms of Rabbi Akiva's impact on the formation of the Mishnah, this is a very important piece of halachic history for you to be aware of, and just you should know the makor for that as well. The Gemara Masechah Sanhedrin Daf Pevav, which again establishes the principle Stam Mishnah Rabbi Meir, Stam Tosefta Rabbi Nechemiah, Stam Sifra Rabbi Yehuda. Okay, so this is all the view of Rabbi Akiva, that there are multiple zmanim. Okay, Amar Rabbi Chanan Rabbi Yochanan Zodivrei Rabbi Akiva Stimtai. The Darish Zman Zmanam Zmanehem. But Chachamim Omrim that in today's day and age, ain't Korino Sala Bismana. We only have the 14th and 15th. We don't have the Takana of the Kfarim anymore. Mesam Rabbi Yehuda Ema Sahai Bisman Sheshanim Ketiknan V'Yisrael Shruyim Al Admasam. Aval Bismana Zeh Ho Mistaklin Ba in Korino Sala Bismana. That when you had the Takana of the Kfarim, it's when we were Mekadesh the Chodesh. We just finished Parshas Bo Al Pia Re'iyah. But nowadays, when everybody just calculates 1 month from Purim for Pesach, we can't afford to have people reading the Megillah and Yud Aleph, Yud Beis, and Yud Gimel. We'll throw off the calendar for purposes of Pesach. There are other days in the Rishonim how to read that line, but that's the way that Rashi interprets the line. So, just in the interest of time, we'll stick with this understanding. And just you should be aware that Rabbeinu Chananel thinks that Mistaklan Ba is actually a reference to the Aniyim that we spoke about in terms of the problem of reading the Megillah on Shabbos. So Rabbi Yehuda Aliba Deman, who is the Shita based on? Ilem Aliba de Rabbi Kiva Aliba Zmanazei Yisrael Takanasa. Rabbi Kiva believed that the Kfarim should continue to read Yud Yud Beis Yud Gimel even in his generation, which was after the destruction of the Beis Hamikdash, and they were no longer Mekadesh Al Pi Re'iyah. Elalav Aliba de Rabbana. He must be following the Shita de Rabbana. Bisman Shashanim Ketiknan Yisrael Shruna Yod Masam Mia Karinan Tiyuvta de Rabbi Yochanan Tiyuvta. Okay, and this is the question against Rabbi Yochanan, who said our Mishnah could only be in accordance with Rabbi Akiva. It sounds like that our Mishnah could be in accordance with the Rabbanan. That it's the Chachamim who say and that we only read the Megillah either Yadalid in the cities and in the villages, and Tesvav in the Krach Mukavim Chomi Mos Yeshov and Taminam Yahachi. Ami Rehude Mas Bisman Shashanim Ketikna Yisrael Shruni Alad Masan. That is when the Takana the Kfarim applies. Bisman Azah Bistaklin Ba Ein Koino Sala Bisman. Rav Ashi Kash the Rabbi Yehuda the Rabbi Yehuda. Seems like we have two different traditions of Rabbi Yehuda. We'll just read a few more lines, then we'll call it a day. Umokim Malabraisa Rabbi Yossi Rabbi Yehuda. Umiyamar Rabbi Yehuda Bisman Hazah Hom Bistaklin Ba Ein Koino Sala Bismana. Or min, is that really the sheet of Rabbi Yehuda? Am Rabbi Yehuda Masai Makom Shenichnasin B'Sheni V'Chamishi. Makom Shenichnasin B'Sheni V'Chamishi in Koinosa Ela Bismana. It's like Rabbi Yehuda says that there continues to be a takana of kfarim for places that come into the big cities on Monday and Thursday. Makom Shenichnasin B'Sheni V'Chamishi Mia Karinan V'Afilu Bismana Zeh. So Mokim Alabraisa Ki Rabbi Yossi Rabbi Yehuda. Mishum the Kasha the Rabbi Yehuda Mokim Alabraisa Rabbi Yossi Rabbi Yehuda. Is it better that way? Rav Ashi Shmi'alei, Rav Ashi, this is just a way of resolving everything. De'ika the Tani like Rabbi Yehuda, De'ika the Tani like Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Yehuda. Midikasha the Rabbi Yehuda, since you have a potential conflict, an internal contradiction, the Shita Rabbi Yehuda, Amar Man the Tani like Rabbi Yehuda, Lav Dafka, Man the Tani like Rabbi Yossi, Bar Yehuda Dafka. Let's just chazer what we saw. There are 5 potential days for reading the Megillah. The walled cities always read on the 15th, unless there's a conflict with Shabbos. Large cities with Minyanim always have reading on the 14th. The villages, they're maktim liyom haknisa. It could very well fall out that the 14th is either Monday or Thursday, but they have as early as Yud Aleph to read if Yud Dalet falls out on Sunday. There are 2 different rationales for that. One of them is really a favor to the Kfarim, since they're coming in either for Beis Din or for Kriyas HaTorah, so we say, why be matriach them to come in again? The Gemara puts things much more in terms of to the advantage of the Bnei Ayaro. Since the Bnei Kfarim were villagers, they were farmers, they would sell their wares. We needed them to be available to come back and sell things on Purim. Purim is a short day. You don't want to overload Purim. And so, like, for example, in our shul, we're having our Purim carnival a week before Purim because the sisterhood told me Purim is too busy. So I quoted this Gemara. I said, that's exactly right. That's why the Bnei Kfarim needed to read not on Purim. They needed to read earlier. What does it mean that Yud Gimel Zman Kila Lakoli, that you didn't need a special takana, the Anshe Knesses HaGedola? Half a step back. The Gemara assumes that the Anshe Knesses HaGedola, the ones that came up with this takana, because no later generation would have been able to undo it. Ein based in Yachal Avata, the based in Chavir, Ein Ken Gadol Mimenu Chachma V'Minyan. Next point. What does it mean that Yud Gimel is Man Kilo Akoli and doesn't need a special riboy? So according to Rashi, it means since it was the day of the military victory, you could obviously read the Megillah on that day. Rabbeinu Tam and the Shiltos disagree, quoting that Gos Maimunios, that it means that they were already in the times of the Gemara, they were observing Tainus Esther on Yud Gimel. That's in contradistinction to the view of the Rambam, who says that the observance of Tainus Esther is really B'Toras Minhag. We encountered the idea that this Mishnah was really a liba de Rabbi Akiva, Zadivrei Rabbi Akiva Stimta. That was very controversial. We just saw Derech Agav, something important for you guys to know, that there is a shita out there that all Stam Mishnah, Stam Tosefta, Stam Sifra, all of these are within the school of Rabbi Akiva. That Rabbi Akiva is really the one who is most responsible for the formation of Torah Sheba'al Peh. God willing, we will pick it up there tomorrow. I'll try to, more or less keep this pace.
I think it's only appropriate we started this today when we went to visit